Under the soft glow of city lights, the streets were still buzzing with life, though most people hurried past without a glance at the shadows around them. Cars roared, neon signs blinked, and laughter spilled from expensive restaurants. Yet, just a few steps away, near the edge of a dimly lit alley, sat a boy with messy hair, old clothes too big for his frame, and eyes that seemed far older than his years. Most ignored him, their heads lowered, their minds elsewhere. But that night, something unexpected happened. The story begins with a man who had everything: wealth, power, and status. People in the city knew him as a self-made millionaire, a man who climbed from nothing to sit at the top. His name was Daniel, and though he carried success on his shoulders, his heart carried a wound no amount of money could ever heal. Years ago, Daniel had lost his only son in a tragic accident, and though the world believed he had moved on, the truth was different. Every night, he replayed memories of the boy's laughter, the way his small hand had once clutched his, and the sound of his voice calling him Dad. Daniel's girlfriend Amelia was different from the world he surrounded himself with. She was thoughtful, kind, and often challenged him in ways no one else dared, while others praised his luxury and power. Amelia always reminded him to stay grounded. It was on an ordinary evening, as they stepped out of a high-end restaurant, that the extraordinary moment unfolded. Amelia clutched his arm, her voice suddenly trembling as her eyes locked on a frail figure near the corner. "Daniel, look," she whispered, her grip tightening at first. Daniel followed her gaze with little interest, used to seeing the homeless scattered around the city. But then his eyes fell on the child sitting against the cold stone wall. The boy's hair was messy, his face smudged with dirt, and his clothes tattered. Yet none of that mattered when Daniel noticed his eyes that mirrored the exact shade, shape, and sorrow of the son he had buried years ago. Amelia's words broke the silence like a sharp crack. "He looks like your dead son," she said, barely able to believe what she saw. Daniel froze. Her words hit him like a storm, pulling him into memories he had buried deep. The laughter of a boy running across a garden, the small shoes lined up by the door, the echoes of bedtime of it came rushing back in that instant. His chest tightened, his throat dry. He blinked, but the image of the homeless child didn't fade. It was as if his son had returned, not in the safety of a home, but in the harsh reality of the streets. Amelia's eyes filled with emotion, and she turned to Daniel. "Do you see it too? It's not just me, right?" Daniel struggled to speak, his voice low and strained. "I see it." The city around them blurred. The sound of honking cars, chatter of strangers, and even the cool night breeze of it disappeared. For Daniel, there was only the boy, shivering under the flicker of a street lamp, hugging his knees as though trying to disappear from the world. His heart pounded, each beat echoing a truth he couldn't deny. The resemblance was uncanny, almost impossible. Amelia touched his arm gently. "Maybe it's a sign. Maybe we were meant to see him tonight." Daniel didn't believe in signs. At least, not anymore. After losing his son, he had stopped believing in fate, in miracles, in anything beyond what he could control. Yet here he was, standing frozen in front of a child who looked like a ghost from his past. His body wanted to move closer, but his mind wrestled with fear. What if this was just a cruel coincidence? What if his grief was playing tricks on him? The boy shifted uncomfortably, wrapping his thin arms tighter around himself. For a moment, his eyes lifted and met Daniel's. It was like looking into a mirror of his son's soul. Daniel felt his breath catch, his hand trembling at his side. Amelia leaned closer, her voice urgent but tender. "Daniel, he needs help. You can't just walk away." But Daniel was trapped between two worlds, the powerful millionaire who never let emotions control him, and the grieving father who would give up everything to hear his son's voice again. His lips parted as though to speak, but no words came out. Memories began to clash with the present. He remembered the hospital room, the silence when the doctors shook their heads, the way his world crumbled as he held his son's lifeless hand. That pain had never left him, and now it returned with a force so strong he almost stumbled. And yet, this boy was alive, right in front of him. Could he really ignore him? Amelia's eyes glistened, her heart breaking at Daniel's struggle. "Don't you see? This child could be a second chance." The thought struck deep, though Daniel was afraid to admit it. A second chance. Could life ever be that kind? He had money, influence, and the power to change lives, but when it came to his own son, he had been powerless. And now, standing before this fragile life, he wondered if fate was offering him something he didn't deserve but desperately longed for. The boy lowered his head again, as if too tired to keep looking up. A car sped by, splashing water from a puddle that dampened the edge of his already torn shoes. Amelia gasped, pulling Daniel forward slightly, urging him to act. But Daniel's feet felt like they were cemented to the ground. Inside his chest, a battle raged. Part of him wanted to rush to the boy, wrap his coat around him, and promise him safety. But another part whispered that this wasn't his son, that helping him would only deepen the wound, reminding him daily of the child he lost. Amelia turned to him, her eyes firm but soft. "Daniel, please at least ask him his name." The request was simple, yet to Daniel, it felt monumental. His heart pounded as he took a hesitant step forward. his shadow falling over the boy. The child flinched slightly, glancing up with wary eyes. In that moment, Daniel's voice caught in his throat. It was as though time itself had paused, waiting for him to choose. The city lights flickered. The sound of footsteps and laughter in the distance continued. But for Daniel, the entire world narrowed to the fragile figure before him. His lips parted, ready to speak, yet fear and hope tangled together inside him, refusing to let the words escape. Amelia's voice broke the silence, soft and steady. "If you walk away now, Daniel, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of her words pressing against the walls of his heart. The memory of his son's last smile haunted him, pushing him closer, urging him to take that final step. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet, but determined. He crouched down slowly, lowering himself to the boy's level. The child looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes, his small body tensing as though ready to run. Daniel's voice trembled as he whispered, "What's your name?" The boy's lips parted, a faint sound beginning to form. Daniel leaned in, every muscle in his body tight with anticipation. Amelia held her breath beside him, her hand resting over her heart, waiting for the answer that could change everything. But just as the boy was about to speak, a shadow moved from the alley behind him. A figure stepped out, rough and hurried, pulling the boy back with a firm grip. The child's frightened eyes widened, and before Daniel could react, the stranger muttered something under his breath and started dragging the boy away into the darkness. Daniel's heart lurched, panic flooding his veins. He reached out instinctively, but the figure moved quickly, pulling the boy deeper into the alley where the light couldn't reach. Amelia gasped, her voice trembling with fear. "Daniel, don't let him go." And in that instant, Daniel realized this wasn't just about a resemblance anymore. This was a moment that demanded a choice, one that could alter everything. His body surged with adrenaline, his mind screaming at him to act. But would he step forward and fight for the child who looked like his son, or freeze once again, letting the past dictate his future? The night held its breath, waiting for his answer. Daniel's chest tightened as he watched the figure yank the boy into the shadows. His first instinct was to chase after them, but his legs hesitated. The memory of his son's face collided with the present moment, paralyzing him with both fear and longing. Amelia's voice echoed in his ears, sharp with urgency. "Daniel, don't just stand there. He needs you." Her words snapped through his hesitation, but by the time Daniel lunged forward, the alley was already swallowing them whole. Man's grip on the child was firm, and the boy's small hands clawed at the air, silently pleading. Daniel's heart thumped like a drum, but his stride slowed when the darkness grew thicker. He stopped at the mouth of the alley, breathing hard, his eyes straining to follow where they had gone. Amelia caught up to him, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She placed a hand on his arm, her voice softer now, but filled with disappointment. "Why didn't you run after them? You had the chance." Daniel lowered his gaze, his voice heavy. I froze. For a moment I thought, if I chased him, if I touched him, it would confirm he wasn't my son, and I don't know if I'm ready to face that." Amelia's expression softened, but her concern lingered. She had known Daniel long enough to understand that his grief never left him, but seeing him crumble in the face of a child who resembled his son shook her too. She squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe this isn't about whether he is your son or not. Maybe it's about what he represents. That boy is out there, scared and vulnerable. He needs someone. He needs you." Daniel looked down the alley once more, but it was empty now, as though nothing had happened. The city noise carried on, indifferent. Yet inside him, something had shifted. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his massive bed, surrounded by silence and shadows. Amelia lay beside him, quietly awake, sensing the storm brewing in him. She wanted to comfort him, but knew that Daniel often needed space to process his pain. His mind kept circling back to the boy's eyes. They weren't just similar to his son's. They were almost identical. He remembered the way they widened when the stranger dragged him away, filled with the same fear his son once showed when thunder boomed outside their house. The resemblance was more than unsettling. It was haunting. Daniel rose from bed before dawn and stood by the window, watching the city begin to stir. The skyline, with its tall towers and shining lights, had always been a symbol of his success. Yet now, it mocked him. What good was all this wealth when a child who looked like his son was out there suffering? By morning, Daniel had made a decision. He couldn't let this go. He needed answers. He needed to know who that boy was, why he was on the streets, and who the man that took him was. Amelia found him at the dining table, untouched coffee growing cold before him. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "I can't stop. Amelia, he looked exactly like my boy. What if there's a connection? What if it wasn't just a coincidence?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "But how could there be? Your son, he's gone, Daniel. You can't bring him back. Maybe this is about healing, not replacing." Daniel swallowed hard. "Maybe, but I have to know. I can't just turn away and pretend I didn't see him. Not when he looked at me like that." Amelia's eyes softened. "Then we'll find him." It wasn't going to be easy. The city was vast, filled with countless streets, alleys, and corners where the forgotten lived. Daniel wasn't used to searching. He was used to commanding, building, acquiring, but this was different. This wasn't a business deal. This was personal. The following days became a blur of effort and frustration. Daniel sent discreet inquiries through his connections, asking if anyone had seen a boy fitting the description. Small, frail, around 10 years old, with strikingly familiar eyes, but information on children of the streets rarely traveled far. Meanwhile, Amelia pushed him to go out himself. You won't find him from behind a desk, she reminded him. And so, for the first time in years, Daniel walked the streets without a convoy, without a chauffeur, blending into the noise of the city. They returned to the restaurant where it had happened, asking vendors and passersby if they had seen the boy. Most shook their heads, some shrugged, and a few offered vague stories of children being moved around by older men who watched over them. The word gang surfaced more than once, making Daniel's stomach tighten. Amelia noticed his unease. If he's under someone's control, that makes it harder but not impossible. You have resources. Use them. Daniel did. He quietly hired a private investigator, a man known for finding the He gave him only one instruction: find the boy who was outside the restaurant 2 nights ago. Bring me the truth, no matter what it is. While the investigator began his work, Daniel found himself revisiting his memories more often. He would sit in his study, staring at framed photos of his son smiling in the park, holding a toy car, his little arms wrapped around Daniel's neck. Each picture made the resemblance clearer. The boy in the alley wasn't just similar, he was almost a mirror. The shape of his face, the slope of his nose, the way he held himself when frightened, it was uncanny. But was it possible? Could there be a deeper connection? His mind toyed with impossible questions. Had something gone wrong years ago? Was there something about his son's death he didn't know? The more he thought about it, the more restless he became. Amelia noticed his growing obsession. Daniel, she said one evening, as they sat together, you need to prepare yourself. What if the boy has nothing to do with your past? What if he's just another child who needs help? Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired but determined. Then I'll help him anyway. But if there's even the smallest chance that he's connected to me, I have to find out. A week passed before the investigator returned with news. He didn't bring the boy, but he brought details that made Daniel's blood run cold. The child's name is Samuel, the man said, sliding a small file across the table. He's been seen on and off in the downtown area, always with a man named Victor. Victor has a history of petty crimes, involvement with street gangs, and a reputation for using children to beg. Samuel's background is murky. No official records, no schooling, nothing. It's like he just appeared a few years ago. Daniel flipped through the photos in the file. One was grainy, taken from a distance, but it was enough. The boy in the picture was unmistakably the same child he had seen. His heart clenched. What about his family? Daniel asked. The investigator shook his head. Nothing. No one knows where he came from. Some say he was abandoned. Others say Victor picked him up one night and claimed him. No birth certificate, no hospital record. It's like he doesn't exist. Daniel's hands tightened around the folder. A boy with no past, no trace, and yet a face identical to his son's. The coincidence was too sharp, too cruel. Amelia leaned in, her voice a whisper. Daniel, this can't just be chance. Something doesn't add up. Daniel nodded slowly. The mystery deepened, and with it, his determination. He had spent years building his empire, solving problems no one else could. But this was different. This was about blood, memory, and the ache of a father's heart. That night, Daniel barely spoke. He sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames as Amelia watched him silently. Finally, he broke the quiet. If Victor is controlling him, then Samuel isn't safe. And if Samuel really is connected to me somehow, then I can't waste another moment. I have to find him before it's too late. Amelia touched his shoulder gently. We'll find him, but you need to be careful. Whoever Victor is, he won't let go easily. Daniel turned to her, his expression firm. I don't care. I lost my son once. I won't let it happen again, even if this boy isn't truly mine. The fire crackled between them, the weight of unspoken fears filling the room. Amelia knew Daniel's heart was set, and she knew that the road ahead would not only test his strength, but force him to confront truths he might not be ready for. Somewhere in the city, Samuel was out there silent, lost, and carrying secrets no one yet understood. And Daniel's life, once built on certainty and control, was now tangled in a mystery that felt too personal, too deliberate, to be ignored. The night stretched on, heavy with questions. Who was Samuel really? Why did he look exactly like the son Daniel had buried? And most importantly, what was Victor hiding in the shadows of the city? The answers lay ahead, hidden in the darkness Daniel was about to walk into. And the deeper he went, the more dangerous it would become. The following days grew heavier for Daniel. His mind refused to let go of the boy's face, the haunting resemblance, and the name that now lingered in his thoughts, Samuel. He tried to keep himself occupied with work, meetings, and projects that demanded his attention, but none of it mattered. Even in the middle of boardrooms filled with polished executives, his thoughts wandered to the streets, to the boy sitting in the cold, to the man named Victor who had dragged him away. Every deal he signed, every conversation he had, felt hollow compared to the unanswered questions clawing at him. Amelia noticed how withdrawn he had become. She would find him late at night, staring at old photographs of his son, the framed pictures, scattered across his study desk. Sometimes she caught him murmuring softly, as if speaking to a memory. She worried for him, but she also understood Samuel wasn't just a random child anymore. He had become a mirror of Daniel's grief, a reflection of both his past and his unresolved pain. One evening, Amelia gently suggested, maybe it's time to go see Victor directly. If Samuel is with him, you need to know why. You can't keep circling the mystery from a distance. Daniel's jaw tightened. Victor isn't the type of man who will answer questions willingly. If he's using children to survive, he won't let go easily. People like him don't respond to kindness, they respond to power. Then use yours, Amelia replied softly. You've built an empire, Daniel. You've dealt with harder men before, but this time, you have more at stake. Her words sank deep. That night, Daniel instructed the investigator to track Victor's movements more closely. Within days, reports came back Victor was often seen near the abandoned train yards on the edge of the city, a place known to shelter the forgotten, where fires burned in barrels and shadows carried stories no one wanted to hear. The thought of Samuel being kept in such a place tore at Daniel. He remembered his son's room, bright walls, shelves filled with toys, warmth, and laughter. To think that a boy with his son's face was now sleeping in a cold, broken corner of the city filled him with both rage and sorrow. WHIL. Meanwhile, Amelia began her own quiet search for answers. She spoke with volunteers at local shelters, trying to gather details about Samuel. One woman, an older volunteer with kind eyes, mentioned she had seen the boy once or twice. He never says much, she told Amelia, but his eyes, they tell you more than his words ever could. He looks like he's waiting for someone, like he doesn't belong to the streets, yet he's trapped there. Those words stayed with Amelia. When she repeated them to Daniel, he clenched his fists. Waiting for someone, he muttered, almost to himself. Who? Why? The subplot of Victor slowly began to unfold. He wasn't just a petty criminal, he was a man who had slipped through society's cracks. The investigator discovered Victor had once been a foster child himself, shuffled between homes, abandoned by family, and hardened by years on the streets. Now he seemed to control a group of children, though it wasn't clear if he exploited them, protected them, or something more complicated. Daniel wrestled with conflicting thoughts. If Victor had once been abandoned, was he now repeating the cycle? Or had he become some twisted guardian of lost children, controlling them in exchange for survival? Whatever the case, Samuel was at the center of it, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Victor knew more than he let on. At the same time, Daniel's board of directors began to grow restless. His focus on the company was slipping, and whispers of concern reached his ears. But Daniel didn't care. For the first time in years, his business didn't matter. Samuel mattered. The search for the boy had become his quiet obsession. Amelia, though worried about the toll it was taking, stood by him. One night, Daniel and Amelia drove out to the edge of the city. The investigator had told them Victor was nearby, and though it was dangerous, Daniel couldn't resist. They parked at a distance. Their car lights dimmed, and waited. The air was sharp with cold, and the silence heavy, broken only by the occasional sound of distant trains. Then, from the shadows, Daniel saw them. Victor walked ahead, his posture rough and guarded, and behind him was Samuel. The boy's steps were small, hesitant, as though weighed down by something more than his thin frame. Daniel's chest tightened. Even from far away, he recognized the boy's movements. The way his small hands clutched at his sides, the way he looked around as if searching for an escape. Amelia's breath caught beside him. It's him, she whispered. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, every muscle in his body urging him to get out, to run, to scoop the boy into his arms and never let go. But he stayed still, frozen again, the fear of shattering the fragile moment stopping him. What if he confronted Victor and Samuel rejected him? What if Samuel wasn't connected to him at all? The tension built as Victor guided the boy to the train yard before disappearing into the shadows. Samuel turned his head, and for a split second, his eyes locked onto Daniel's car. His gaze was soft, confused, but it lingered as though he felt something, some pull, some recognition. Daniel's heart pounded. Amelia gripped his arm. He saw you, she whispered. That night, Daniel couldn't shake the look in Samuel's eyes. It wasn't just fear, it was curiosity, almost familiarity. Could the boy sense something too? The conflict grew deeper, not just outside but inside Daniel himself. He began to question what he truly wanted. Did he want Samuel because of who the boy was, or because of who he reminded him of? Was he trying to save Samuel, or save himself from drowning in grief? Amelia noticed the change in his questions. Daniel, don't lose sight of what matters. Whether or not he's connected to you, Samuel deserves a life better than this. That's what you should fight for. But Daniel couldn't help himself. Late one night, he found himself opening old files, digging through records of his son's death. He reread medical reports, accident files, even the hospital paperwork. He was searching for something, anything that didn't add up. Something that could explain why a boy so identical to his son could exist and then came another layer of tension. The investigator returned, his face grave. I don't know how to say this, but Victor seems unusually protective of Samuel. He doesn't treat him like the others. He keeps him close, doesn't let him out of sight. It's almost as if Samuel means more to him than the rest. The idea rattled Daniel. Why? Why would Victor guard Samuel so closely? What did he know? The deeper Daniel dug, the more questions surfaced. The mystery grew heavier, the shadows darker. Every clue led to another wall, another unanswered riddle. Samuel wasn't just a homeless boy anymore. He had become the center of a storm that reached into Daniel's past. Victor's secrets, and Amelia's fears. One night, Amelia found Daniel standing alone on the balcony, staring into the city. His voice was quiet when he spoke. What if Samuel isn't just a boy who looks like my son? What if there's a truth I was never meant to see? Amelia's heart ached at his words. She touched his shoulder, but her own fears gnawed at her. Deep inside, she too wondered if fate was leading them to something bigger, something neither of them was prepared for. And far away, in the cold corners of the city, Samuel sat under Victor's watchful eye, staring at the stars with the same longing Daniel carried in his heart. The boy didn't know why the man in the car had felt so familiar, but the memory of that fleeting moment stayed with him. He hugged his knees tighter, whispering words only the night could hear. The conflict was no longer just about finding Samuel. It was about unraveling a truth hidden in the shadows, one that could break Daniel or give him a second chance at the life he lost. The night waited, heavy with secrets, and the deeper Daniel stepped into this mystery, the more dangerous it became, not just for him, but for everyone tied to Samuel's fate. The nights grew longer for Daniel, each one pulling him deeper into the storm that surrounded Samuel. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's face. Every time he stepped into his office, he felt the weight of unfinished business pressing harder on his chest. Work became an afterthought. Friends grew distant, and even Amelia began to see the shadows under his eyes deepen. His entire world narrowed to one point: Samuel. The investigator's reports only added fuel to the fire. Victor wasn't careless. He moved Samuel constantly, never staying in the same place too long. Some nights they were seen near the train yard, other nights at the docks, and sometimes they disappeared for days. Victor's pattern was erratic, almost as if he knew someone was watching. That unpredictability gnawed at Daniel, making him restless. Amelia tried to be the voice of reason, but even her calm couldn't erase the fear that was spreading between them. Daniel, this is becoming dangerous. Victor isn't just some drifter. With a child, there's something about him, something hidden. What if he knows exactly what Samuel means to you? Daniel looked at her with tired, determined eyes. Then I have to find out. I can't stop now. I'm too close. The tension inside him only grew when the investigator came with a startling update. I overheard something, he said cautiously. Victor referred to Samuel as special, not in the usual way people talk about kids. It sounded protective, almost like Samuel was different from the others he controls. The word special hung in the air, heavy with meaning Daniel couldn't quite grasp. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. Did he say why? The investigator shook his head. No, but I got the sense that Victor's attachment to Samuel isn't random. There's a reason, and it's not just because the boy's useful on the streets. Daniel's pulse quickened. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Could Samuel's past be tied to his own, in ways no one expected? Was there something about his son's death that had never been told to him? Every unanswered question pressed harder against him, and his need for the truth became unbearable. He decided he couldn't wait anymore. He had to see Samuel face to face. No more hiding in the shadows, no more watching from a distance. He needed to hear the boy's voice, ask him questions, feel the truth in his presence. But to do that, he would have to confront Victor directly, no matter the risk. Amelia's fear grew as Daniel's resolve hardened. If you go to him, Daniel, it won't just be questions and answers. Men like Victor don't talk, they fight. And if Samuel is really important to him, he won't let you near without a battle. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then I'll fight. For once, I'm not doing this for business, for money, or for myself. I'm doing this for him, for the boy. The following night, Daniel followed the investigator's lead to a warehouse near the docks where Victor had been spotted. The place was run down, its walls covered in graffiti, the air thick with the smell of rust and salt water. Daniel parked, his car in the shadows, his heart pounding as he stepped out. Amelia had begged him not to go alone, but he refused to let her follow. He couldn't risk her safety. He moved carefully, each step echoing softly against the cracked pavement. The warehouse loomed before him, silent except for the faint hum of the river beyond. He pressed closer, peering through a broken window, and there he saw them. Victor sat on an old crate, his posture stiff and alert, while Samuel curled up against a corner, his small frame hunched, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. A faint fire burned in a tin barrel nearby, casting flickering shadows that danced across the boy's face. Daniel's breath caught. Even in the dim light, the resemblance to his son was undeniable. He pushed the door open slowly, the creak echoing. Through the stillness, Victor's head snapped up immediately, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto Daniel. Samuel stirred, lifting his head. confusion spreading across his tired features. Victor rose to his feet, his tone sharp. "You've been following us." Daniel's voice trembled, but he steadied it. "I'm not here to fight, I just need to talk to the boy." Victor stepped forward, blocking the path between Daniel and Samuel. His presence was rough, intimidating, but his eyes carried something strange, something almost defensive. "He doesn't talk to strangers, especially ones like you." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. "He's not just some boy to me. He looks exactly like my son, and I need to know why." For a moment, silence filled the warehouse, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Samuel's wide eyes shifted. Between the two men, sensing the tension, sensing the storm about to break, Victor's lips curled into something between a sneer and a grimace. "So you saw it too. The resemblance." Daniel's breath hitched. "You know." Victor didn't answer directly. Instead, he glanced back at Samuel, his gaze softening for just a heartbeat. "The world doesn't care about kids like him. That's why he's with me. I protect him." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Protect him by dragging him through alleys and using him to beg on the streets. That's not protection. That's prison." Victor's expression darkened. "You don't understand. You don't know what he is, where he came from. If you did, you'd realize he's safer with me than with anyone else." The words struck Daniel like lightning. What are you talking about?" Victor stepped closer, his tone low but edged with warning. "Some truths don't need to be uncovered. Walk away before you regret it." But Daniel refused to back down. He took a step forward too, his eyes burning with determination. "No, I've already lost one son. I won't lose this boy too. If there's something you know, you're going to tell me? I need the truth." The tension thickened, the space between them charged with unspoken threats. Samuel shifted nervously, his small hands gripping the edge of the crate. He looked at Daniel again, and this time his eyes lingered longer, as though drawn by an invisible thread. Then, in a voice so quiet it almost broke the silence, Samuel whispered, "Why do you look at me like you know me?" Daniel's heart nearly stopped. The boy had spoken directly to him, his voice fragile yet piercing. It wasn't just the resemblance anymore, it was connection. Victor snapped his head toward Samuel, his voice harsh. "Don't talk to him." But Samuel didn't lower his gaze. His small eyes stayed fixed on Daniel, filled with both fear and longing, and in that moment, Daniel knew he couldn't turn back. The clash was inevitable now, the past, the present, the secrets Victor held, and the bond forming between Daniel and Samuel, all of it was hurtling toward something explosive. The air inside the warehouse grew tighter, charged with suspense, as if the walls themselves were waiting for what would come next. Daniel braced himself, every muscle coiled, every breath heavy. Amelia's warnings echoed in his head, but his heart drowned them out. This was at the moment where everything balanced on a knife's edge, and as Victor stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous, the firelight flickering across his hardened face, Daniel knew the truth he sought was within reach, but it would come at a cost neither of them could yet imagine. Victor's shadow loomed closer, his stance firm, his eyes locked on Daniel, as if daring him to take another step. The crackle of the fire in the barrel echoed louder in the silence, each flicker casting sharper angles across Samuel's small face. Daniel's chest rose and fell heavily, every breath dragging him deeper into the unknown. He had prepared himself for a confrontation, but not for what Victor said next. "You think you're the only one who's lost something." Victor's voice was rough, sharp, but beneath it carried a weight Daniel hadn't expected. "You don't know the truth about that boy? You don't even know what you're chasing." Daniel's fists tightened. "Then tell me. If you know something, I deserve to hear it." Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, he looked almost torn, as though speaking the words would unleash something he had tried to bury. He glanced back at Samuel, who sat quietly, his wide eyes locked on Daniel. Then Victor muttered, "He wasn't supposed to survive." The words landed like a stone in Daniel's chest. His mind raced, his breath caught, but Victor didn't elaborate. He only clenched his jaw, his gaze hardening once again. "What do you mean?" Daniel's voice cracked, the tension in his throat pushing each word out. "What are you talking about?" Victor stayed silent. Samuel shifted uncomfortably, hugging his knees tighter, as if afraid of what might spill into the open. The silence stretched unbearably, until Samuel finally whispered, "He tells me I was found, that I shouldn't have been alive when he saw me." His voice trembled, but his eyes didn't leave Daniel's. "But I don't remember anything before him." Daniel staggered back a step, the floor beneath him seeming to tilt. A child with no memory, no records, no past, and Victor claiming he wasn't supposed to survive? The resemblance to his own son twisted the knot tighter in his chest. Could it be possible? Was the tragedy he had mourned for years not what he believed? Victor's voice cut through again, harsher now, as though forcing Daniel to back away. "Leave it alone. Whatever you think, it's better buried. You don't want the truth. Trust me." But Daniel's resolve only deepened. "You don't get to decide that for me. I need the truth about him. About everything." The tension was broken by sudden movement outside the warehouse. Footsteps, low voices. The investigator had warned Daniel that Victor wasn't alone, that others sometimes worked with him. Now, the sound of more men approaching sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Victor's head snapped toward the noise. His expression hardening, he turned back to Daniel, his voice sharp and low. You brought trouble with you. You think you're helping him, but now, you've put him in danger. The footsteps drew nearer, and Samuel's small body tensed, his eyes darting toward the door. Daniel's pulse quickened, a storm of panic and determination colliding inside him. Before Daniel could speak again, the warehouse doors banged open. Two rough-looking men entered, their faces shadowed by the dim light. One of them glanced between Victor and Daniel, his tone suspicious. What's going on here? Victor straightened, stepping in front of Samuel, shielding him almost instinctively. The move surprised Daniel. It wasn't the gesture of a man who only exploited the boy. It was protective, defensive. Daniel caught it instantly, and it only deepened the mystery. Why would Victor, a man with a history of using children, guard Samuel so fiercely in this moment? What was the boy's true importance to him? The men exchanged glances, clearly uneasy at Daniel's presence. We told you not to bring outsiders here, one of them snapped at Victor. Daniel's mind spun as he watched the exchange. It wasn't just about a man and a boy surviving on the streets. There was something larger at play, something that involved others, something Samuel was tied to. The stakes had just risen, and Daniel knew he was standing on the edge of a dangerous truth. Victor's voice dropped, sharp and commanding. Get out, this is my problem. But the men didn't move, their eyes lingered on Daniel. Suspicion? Growing. One of them smirked, his tone mocking. Looks like the rich man's found himself a soft spot. Maybe we should tell the others. They'll want to know someone's sniffing around the boy. Daniel's blood ran cold. The others? How? Many more were involved in this. And why did they care about Samuel? Victor clenched his fists, his body tense. I said leave. For a moment, it seemed like a fight would break out, but the men finally sneered and stepped back toward the door. Fine, but don't say we didn't warn you. That boy's nothing but trouble. And if he falls into the wrong hands, you won't be able to stop what comes next. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the air heavy with tension. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. The boy wasn't supposed to survive. The men wanted to tell the others. Samuel was special. Each piece fit together into a puzzle that terrified him more with every turn. He turned back to Victor, his voice rough but steady. What do they mean? Why are they interested in Samuel? Who is this boy really? Victor didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Samuel, his jaw tight, his eyes carrying something almost sorrowful. Go back to your corner, kid. But Samuel didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Daniel, wide and searching. Why do you look at me like that? He asked again, his voice breaking with a mixture of fear and hope. Daniel's breath caught, his eyes burning. He couldn't answer the question. Not yet. The truth was tangled in secrets Victor refused to share, in dangers that now loomed larger than he had imagined. But one thing was clear. Samuel was at the center of something far greater than coincidence. The fire flickered lower, shadows stretching longer against the warehouse walls. Outside, the sound of distant footsteps faded into silence, but the tension remained sharp. Unyielding. Daniel stood between the past he had buried and the future he couldn't yet see, every nerve in his body alive with suspense. The boy who looked like his dead son was no ordinary child, and the truth about who Samuel was and why so many wanted to control him was about to unravel in ways Daniel wasn't ready for. But the choice was no longer his to delay. The stakes had risen, the danger closing in, and as Samuel's innocent eyes held his, Daniel knew there was no turning back. Daniel stood frozen in the warehouse, Samuel's eyes searching his, pleading for answers. The boy's small frame looked fragile in the shadows, but his presence carried a weight Daniel couldn't ignore. The unanswered questions swirled louder in his head than the fire crackling in the barrel. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to lead to one chilling truth. Samuel wasn't just a coincidence. Victor finally broke the silence, his voice low and rough. You want answers? Fine, but once you hear them, there's no going back. Daniel nodded, his pulse pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in his ears. Tell me. Victor turned toward Samuel, his shoulders tense. That night, years ago, night you lost your son, there was another child. A fire broke out near the foster home. We found him, barely alive. The others, they didn't make it. The boy had no name, no family, nothing. And there was something about him. His voice trailed, as if the memory still haunted him. Daniel's heart thudded painfully. What are you saying? Victor's eyes met his, hard and direct. I'm saying Samuel was pulled from the wreckage the same night your son was declared. Dad, you were told there were no survivors. But there was. And somehow, fate put him in my path. The world tilted beneath Daniel, his knees weakened, his breath caught. He stared at Samuel, every detail of the boy's face now sharper, every resemblance undeniable. The possibility that this child could be his son. A life he had mourned for years rushed through him like fire. Samuel, hearing Victor's words, looked from one man to the other, his lips trembling. Are you my father? Tears blurred Daniel's vision. He stepped forward, his voice raw. I don't know, but God, I need to find out. Victor raised a hand, stopping him. It's not that simple. Those men who came earlier, they weren't lying. Samuel isn't just some forgotten child. There are people looking for him. Dangerous people. They know he survived, and they want him back. You take him now, you put both your lives at risk. The weight of Victor's warning pressed heavily on Daniel, but his heart screamed louder. He had already lost his son once. He couldn't lose Samuel too. Before Daniel could speak, the warehouse door slammed open again. This time, more men poured in, their steps heavy, their faces grim. The same ones who had threatened Victor had returned, and now they weren't alone. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward, his voice cold. Hand over the boy, he doesn't belong to you. Samuel clung to Daniel's leg instinctively, fear etched on his face. Daniel shielded him, his chest heaving, his mind racing for a way out. Victor stood between them and the men, his fists clenched. You're not taking him? The leader sneered. You think you can protect him? You've been hiding him all these years. But it's over. The boy has value you can't even understand. Daniel's blood ran cold. Value, he's a child. But the man only smirked. You'll never understand. Step aside. The standoff grew unbearable, tension crackling like a live wire. Then, in a burst of courage Daniel didn't know he still had, he pulled Samuel close and shouted, "Run!" Chaos erupted. Victor lunged at the intruders, fists flying, buying them precious seconds. Daniel grabbed Samuel's hand and darted toward the side door, his heart hammering as shouts and crashes echoed behind them. They stumbled into the cold night air, breathless, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. Samuel's small hand clutched his with desperation, but Daniel didn't let go. They ran until their legs screamed, until the warehouse was nothing but a dark shadow behind them. Finally, they stopped in a deserted alley, both gasping for breath. Daniel crouched to meet Samuel's eyes, his voice shaking. I don't care what they say. I don't care who wants you. From now on, you're not alone. Do you understand? I'll fight for you. Samuel's tears spilled over, and he threw his arms around Daniel's neck. For the first time, Daniel let himself embrace the possibility. Maybe this boy really was his son. Maybe fate had given him a second chance. But just as that thought settled in his heart, a sudden flash of light caught his eye. At the mouth of the alley stood Victor, bloodied but standing. His face was stern, but there was something softer in his eyes now. They won't stop coming, Victor warned, his voice strained. If you want to keep him safe, you can't stay here. You'll have to disappear. Daniel nodded, knowing he was right. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. And then, as if fate wanted to strike one final blow, Victor added something that made Daniel's blood run cold. Before you go, you need to know. Samuel may not be your son, but he carries something far more dangerous than you realize. The resemblance isn't coincidence, it's connected. The truth about him goes deeper than either of us imagined. Daniel froze, his heart torn between hope and dread. He looked down at Samuel, who stared back with wide, trusting eyes. The boy he thought could be his son might not be his after all. But whatever truth lay hidden, it was enough to make powerful men hunt him, enough to put both their lives in danger. And with that chilling twist, Daniel realized his journey was only beginning. The child in his arms wasn't just a reminder of the past, he was the key to a future filled with answers. Daniel wasn't sure he was ready to face. Daniel stood in the alley, his arms wrapped tightly around Samuel as Victor's words echoed. In his mind, the chill of the night seeped into his bones, but it wasn't the cold that made him tremble, it was the fear of the unknown, the weight of choices that could not be undone. Samuel looked up at him with wide, searching eyes, still clinging to him as though he were the only safe place left in the world. In that moment, Daniel realized it didn't matter whether this child truly was his blood or not. What mattered was the bond forming between them, the kind of connection no stranger could erase. Victor stepped closer, his body bruised and battered from the fight inside the warehouse. His voice was heavy, but there was an urgency in his tone. Daniel, listen to me. Samuel carries secrets even he doesn't understand. That's why those men want him. But there's something else you need to hear, something I've kept from you. Daniel steadied himself, bracing for yet another blow. What else could there be? Victor sighed, glancing at Samuel before speaking. When I found him years ago, there was a file with his name, or at least the name they gave him. That file linked back to the same organization that helped cover up your son's death. They didn't just make a mistake, Daniel, they wanted your son gone. And Samuel may have been part of their plan. That's why he looks like him. He was meant to replace what you lost. The revelation hit like a storm. Daniel's mind raced through memories of loss, through nights of grief and unanswered questions. His heart ached at the thought that Samuel might not only resemble his son but had been tied to the same forces that stole his child away. Samuel's voice broke through the silence, soft and trembling. Does that mean I'm not real? That I don't belong anywhere? Daniel knelt down, placing his hands gently on the boy's shoulders. No, Samuel, you are real. You are here, right now, and you matter more than anything. You're not a replacement. You're you, and that's enough for me. For the first time, Samuel allowed himself to cry openly, and Daniel held him close, promising silently that no matter what, he wouldn't abandon him. Victor leaned against the wall, his face tired but his eyes sharp. They'll keep coming for him. But there's a way to stop this. The truth, if it comes out, will destroy them. That file? Daniel, I kept it hidden all these years. If we expose it, Samuel won't have to run anymore. It wasn't an easy choice. To expose such powerful people meant risking everything: money, reputation, even safety. But Daniel had already lost too much by staying silent in the past. He thought of his girlfriend, who first noticed Samuel, and whispered those haunting words. He thought of the life he'd built, the walls of wealth that never filled the emptiness in his heart. And then he thought of Samuel, whose small hand now gripped his tightly. "We end it," Daniel said firmly. "No more running." The following weeks were a blur of planning and risk. With Victor's help, Daniel gathered evidence from the file, piecing together the truth about the organization, their corruption, and the lies that had haunted his life for years. Late nights were spent huddled over documents, whispering in safe houses, always looking over their shoulders. Samuel stayed close, slowly growing into the safety Daniel provided, though fear never fully left his eyes. Daniel's girlfriend returned to his side during this time. At first she was overwhelmed by the chaos, but when she saw the tenderness between Daniel and Samuel, her heart softened. She realized that this fight wasn't just about uncovering a hidden truth, it was about giving a child a chance at life, a chance at belonging. Finally, the day came when the evidence was handed to journalists, lawyers, and those who could not be silenced. The story broke wide open, shaking the city to its core. Names of powerful men were exposed, secrets long buried spilled into the light. There was backlash, threats, and attempts to silence them, but the truth had already taken root. The organization's grip began to crumble. Through it all, Daniel stood firm, his hand never letting go of Samuel's. The boy once lost and nameless now had a place. And though DNA tests later revealed that Samuel was not biologically Daniel's son, neither of them cared anymore. Their bond had grown deeper than blood. One evening, after the dust of the storm began to settle, Daniel took Samuel to the cemetery where his son had been laid to rest. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel stood quietly beside him, his small hand clutching Daniel's fingers. "This is where my son rests," Daniel said softly, "and even though you're not him, I think he'd be glad that you're here with me. You've given me something I thought I'd never have, again a reason to fight, a reason to love." Samuel looked up at him, tears brimming in his eyes. "And you gave me a family." Daniel knelt, pulling Samuel into a tight embrace as the wind whispered gently through the trees. For the first time in years, his heart felt whole. Not because the pain of losing his son was gone, but because he had found meaning again in the life of another. Victor, standing a few steps back, watched quietly. For all his flaws and secrets, he had played his part in bringing them together. With the truth now free and the threat against Samuel fading, he finally allowed himself a moment of peace. In the weeks that followed, Daniel legally adopted Samuel. The process was long, but when the day came, and Samuel officially became his son in the eyes of the law, tears filled Daniel's eyes. The boy who once had no name, no home, and no hope was now Samuel Carter, the son of a man who had lost everything and found it again in the most unexpected way. The city moved on. Scandals faded, and people whispered less about the millionaire who risked it all for a homeless boy. But Daniel didn't care about the world's opinions anymore. His wealth, once a shield against his grief, now served a greater purpose, building schools, shelters, and programs for children like Samuel, children who had been forgotten by everyone else. At night, when the world grew quiet, Daniel would sit by Samuel's bed, watching him sleep peacefully. The nightmares that once haunted the boy had softened, replaced by dreams of a future he could finally believe in. Sometimes, Daniel thought back to the moment it all began. His girlfriend's startled whisper, "He looks like your dead son." What once had felt like a cruel reminder of loss had become the beginning of redemption, a chance to turn tragedy into something meaningful. Life had given him an unexpected second chance, and while he would never forget the child he lost, he knew his heart had been given room to love again. Samuel wasn't a replacement, nor a shadow of the past, he was his own person, and together, they were building a life filled with hope. As Daniel watched the boy laugh and play in the garden one evening, he felt the weight of his grief finally lift. Samuel turned to him, waving with a grin that reached his eyes. Daniel smiled back, realizing that this was the true gift. Life had offered him not answers, not revenge, but the simple beauty of a child's smile, the healing power of love, and the strength to move forward. And so, the story ended not with loss, but with the beginning. A man who had mourned in silence found his voice again through the laughter of a boy who once had nothing. Together, they proved that family is not only about blood, but about choice, about love, and about the courage to hold on when everything else says let go. Their journey had been filled with pain, secrets, and danger, but at its heart, it was about something timeless: the way love can rebuild even the most broken pieces, the way hope can rise out of despair, and the way one child can change a man's life forever. Daniel knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but with Samuel by his side, he was ready for anything. And as they walked hand in hand into the fading light of evening, the story of loss finally became a story of love, resilience, and second chances.